going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Fully Inflated Football Podcast. We have a great show ahead of us here today. We're going to be doing things a little bit differently today. We're at the midway season. We got the, election day here. Honestly, week 8 feels like years ago at this point. So instead of recapping week 8, don't worry, we'll get back to the weekly recaps next week. We're going to mix things up a little bit, but it's going to be a really fun show. I think you guys might even like this one more. We have an exciting topic that many of you guys have been asking for, to rank all of the coaches in the NFL. I swear at least 5, 6, 7 of you guys have requested that specific topic. So we're going to make that a big part of the show today. And then we're going to go through team by team, go back and look at my preseason predictions from late August, and talk about where I was right, where I was wrong, talk about what I see moving forward for the second half of each team, going, team by team. And then we'll adjust our postseason predictions as we see fit as well, if that's necessary. I'm actually pretty proud of what we had for our postseason predictions, to give a little teaser for that. But before we do hop into all that, I do want to remind you guys, this show is brought to you by my Patreon. That is patreon.com/ThatFranchiseGuy, where you can not just support the show, most importantly, but you can become a part of the show by getting access to the exclusive Patreon mailbag, and then also get access to exclusive content like my weekly picks, early access to videos, and then the TFG Draft Insider Package come draft season, which I cannot believe is actually right around the corner. It is already November, which means draft season, our first mock draft, all that is just about 2 months away, which is just crazy. It feels like we just got out of that. So let's go ahead and hop into the show, man. I'm really excited. I think this is going to be a fun episode. So we're going to start with my coaching ranks here. We're going to start at the bottom at 30, work our way up. We're not going to rank the 2 interim positions with Atlanta and Houston. So we're going to start at the obvious bottom here with Adam Gase at the bottom. He's basically going through the motions there with the Jets. That was a complete flop, and I didn't hate the signing of Adam Gase when they made it. I put more of that blame for Miami's lack of success when Adam Gase was down there on Tannehill. Turns out it was the other way around. Tannehill's actually a pretty good quarterback, and Adam Gase just stinks. The only reason I can explain why he is still there is the Jets genuinely do want the number 1 overall pick. Whether they want to trade that for a bunch of assets for someone that wants Trevor Lawrence, or they want to take Trevor Lawrence and get something for Sam Darnold, that's up in the air as well. But yeah, Adam Gase, the clear-cut bottom. To me, that team has been in disarray for multiple seasons, but especially this year. And then we've got Doug Marrone for the Jacksonville Jaguars, another coach that I think is basically just shark bait at this point. He's just going through the motions. I don't see them bringing him back. They had some good moments early on in the year. I do find it interesting. I actually think Jay Gruden's done a really good job with that offense. I didn't think Jay Gruden was the worst coach in the NFL. Washington let him go. It just wasn't a fit. But they do have an offensive coordinator that I think is actually a top 32 coach in the league, at least a good chance that he is. So that I do find fascinating. But yeah, Doug Marrone, what does he really do? He's an offensive guy. He's an offensive line guy, but he's never really had these great offensive lines, especially in the last few years. So to me, just a guy that isn't really head coach caliber. I'm sure he's a great guy and will go and get an assistant job somewhere as soon as Jacksonville lets him go, but really just going through the motions there. And then number 28, Mike McCarthy. Freaking Mike McCarthy, dude. So for starters, he wasted Aaron Rodgers for 10 years. Just basically threw one of the potentially great, all-time great careers in the trash. It's very clear that he was holding the Packers back, along with some front office issues there in Green Bay. But I don't know how you can see what he's done with this Dallas team and not think that he's one of the worst coaches in the NFL. This has been a total flop of a hiring. There's been there's been some innovation as far as seeing some pre-snap motion and stuff with his actual playbook. I think most of that is from what's his name? Name's escaping me. The former Boise State quarterback. That's their offensive coordinator, Kellen Moore. But yeah, man, the problem with Mike McCarthy is his teams are never cohesive. There's never any discipline. His defenses always stink. He's an offensive guy, but look no further than what happened in Green Bay. Matt Lefleur took over and made sure that the defense, and the defense hasn't been perfect, but it's been much better than it was in the McCarthy days, was at least more disciplined and united, and that just is never the case with Mike McCarthy. It feels like the defensive backs automatically become the worst in the NFL as soon as Mike McCarthy is your head coach. We've now seen this in 2 different spots. They don't win close games. It's just a disaster with Mike McCarthy. I can't imagine Dallas bringing him back for a second year. This was just a completely poor hire. Another problem with Mike McCarthy is the nepotism, not just with players, but also with the coaching staff. The defensive coordinator that they hired, I apologize, I can't draw his name off the top of my head, but he was really taken out of nowhere as far as defensive coordinator candidates. And look at how that defense is doing. But he's someone that Mike McCarthy has worked with throughout his career. So he's just one of these old, stagnant coaches that doesn't really adjust. He just hires the same people that he knows. Not good for the modern NFL, where it's all about adapting and changing and updating your scheme and everything. So then number 27, Anthony Lynn. I do really like Anthony Lynn, and I hope he goes and gets, I don't know if he'll get an offensive coordinator job or some kind of, there's sometimes these assistant head coach positions to be available. I think he's a really solid dude. I just think he's a little bit underqualified to be a head coach. He's obviously, he's a running backs coach. He's never been in full control of either side of the ball. I think it's very clearly that he's not a Harbaugh, a Tomlin, as far as being able to control the entire organization, make the right hirings, and have the right identity for your team. The Chargers have always been a kind of a cultural disaster as far as winning close games and having consistent schemes and everything. So to me, for Anthony Lynn, he just hasn't done the best of jobs there for the Chargers. He's had some great moments. I will give him credit. He's done such a great job at what he is supposed to be a specialist at, and that is developing running backs. Look no further than last week. Troymaine Pope has bounced around the league. He looked outstanding. You got Austin Eckler, Justin Jackson. I think Joshua Kelly looks significantly better than he did at UCLA. So at least his specialty, being a running backs coach, a former running back in the NFL, he's very good at that. If nothing else, he's absolutely going to get hired as a running backs coach for someone. I think if you could steal him to do that, you would be very smart. But yeah, I don't consider him a very good coach by any stretch of the imagination. He might be in that top 32. Obviously, these are the 30 active coaches, but you're going to have guys like Eric Bieniemy entering the picture, potentially Joe Brady, new hirings that are going to create a new list. So I don't know if Anthony Lynn would crack an updated top 32 head coaches in the NFL. I think he's right at the bottom of that. And then Matt Patricia actually came in a little bit higher than I expected. I will say I think he's done some of the right things on the offensive side of the ball to give Stafford a little more of an opportunity to flourish. When he came in, he had this approach of, we're going to run the ball, we're going to be kind of this stubborn old school team. But they've allowed, Darrell Bevell? Is that the offensive coordinator down there or up there? But they've done a good job to at least allow the offense to thrive and realize, okay, this defense actually isn't that good. So I think Patricia does do some updating. But as far as his defense, he just hasn't been able to get this thing together. And ultimately, I think he is going to be let go this year, especially if Detroit doesn't rally and come back this season. This is year 3 of the Matt Patricia project, and they just haven't taken steps up for that defense. And I think that's a major red flag. You're seeing other Belichick coaches, guys like Joe Judge, Brian Flores, even Mike Vrabel is technically a Belichick tree guy. They've all worked out. As for Matt Patricia, he just hasn't been able to get this thing working. So I think the 5 names that we've just listed are gone. I think all these guys are fired. And then next up is kind of guys that I don't really see getting fired. But I think those 5 jobs that we just talked about, those 5 coaches, I think will be open seats, which would mean we have 7 open seats. Sounds like we're talking about the election right now for head coaching candidates for next year. Now, there's a few more guys here that I think are potential fires, and that's going to start with Doug Peterson. Now, I think he's safe because the Eagles are going to coast, basically crawl on their backs into the playoffs by winning this division. They could win this division with 6 wins. It's that bad. But I don't think that's good for the Eagles. I think that actually reminds me of a lot of seasons where Mike McCarthy looked like he was on the fritz, and then Aaron Rodgers just pulled them into the playoffs, and they just didn't really compete. but they kept McCarthy because he made the playoffs. I think that's kind of what we're seeing with Doug Peterson. For one, the play calling is just not good. It's slants and inside zone. And they're trying to get creative with Jalen Hurts. It's not really working. So I don't like the play calling. I especially don't like how unpredictable and unprepared this team is. Every week they find new ways to either lose or get into close games against teams that they shouldn't be all that close against. Frankly, if it weren't for the defense and the personnel in that defense this year, they'd be right in the mix with teams like Washington and Dallas. The Eagles' offense has been inexplicably poor. The regression for Carson Wentz is absolutely concerning. And you look at the fact that they lost two significant coaches that were there when they won the Super Bowl. And that's why we compare it to McCarthy, because McCarthy won that Super Bowl early, and then he didn't really adjust. And they lost, obviously, Frank Reich, who is Indianapolis' head coach, who's going to rank much higher than Doug Peterson on this list. But also the offensive coordinator that went to Minnesota down to Jacksonville, he kind of flamed out, but he was a highly perceived offensive coordinator at the time. So they had really good room to work with that offense, and seems Doug Peterson was not, or at least was the benefactor of having that good staff. So Doug Peterson, to me, could be someone that Philadelphia considers letting go, but I really don't think that's going to happen. I think they make the playoffs, and it's really hard to fire a coach when you make the playoffs. And then we got Zach Taylor at 24. Last week was a good week for Zach Taylor. I'm not going to lie. They got the defense working. They beat the Titans. If it weren't for last week, and maybe this is just recency bias, he'd probably get pushed at least behind Doug Peterson, but there's some pretty bad coaches on this list. I'm just not fully bought in on Zach Taylor. He was kind of hired as the last-ditch candidate for the you got hired because you know Sean McVay types of guys. Now, to Zach Taylor's credit, I suppose, he hasn't completely just copy and pasted the McVay offense. It's been a lot more shotgun, a lot more typical drop backs, looking more like a pro-style offense. So I don't think it's completely fair to say he's just a copy and paste Sean McVay guy, but I don't know how innovative and creative that offense truly is. Now, the offense has been far from the problem in Cincinnati, so I do think Zach Taylor is building his way up to at least get another year to prove himself in Cincinnati. I really don't think he's going to get fired at this point. There was some moments early on in the season I thought that was possible, but right now I just don't see that happening. I would say that he needs to help surround the defense with the right coaching. That's a big part of being a head coach. Even if you're an offensive guy, you need to have a grand scheme of what you want your organization to look like and be on the same page with your coaches. And for the most part, the Bengals defense has been a disaster. And honestly, I think they've underplayed their potential. They have some good players on that side of the ball. And I'm not saying they need to fire the defense coordinator or anything. But yeah, that's an aspect that I think Zach Taylor just hasn't been proved, and he's a very young coach, maybe still trying to figure some of that stuff out. So he's a little bit unknown. And then we got Matt Nagy. There's a lot of Matt Nagy discussion going on right now. It's just so difficult to get a fair evaluation on Matt Nagy because of the quarterback situation he's been dealt. Now, I'm sure he played a hand in making that decision to get Nick Foles, which in part is on him. But for years having to deal with Trubisky and deal with the front office pushing him basically to stand by Trubisky, and I think that probably even played into the Nick Foles decision because the front office probably felt that Trubisky could at least beat out Nick Foles. So I do think that he's been dealt a really bad hand. On the other hand, he gets a ton of crap for his play calling. I think some of it's justified. I think some of it goes too far, especially when a lot of that draws from Nagy basically having to dumb down the offense into oblivion when Trubisky was the quarterback. And I think he's trying to recuperate some of that stuff now that Nick Foles is in there. Again, the front office was pushing Trubisky on him again this offseason, which meant that all of the preparation coming into the year, if not all of it, a large chunk of the preparation had to come in with knowing, okay, Trubisky is our quarterback who is, let's just say, unpredictable coming off the first read, which means he felt he really needed to design a first read offense, which is going to take that ceiling for your offense and drag it way down here. Because if defenses cover up that first read and you're doing play designs like RPOs, play action boots, screen plays, simple passing concepts that is in the quick game, if smart defenses take that stuff away, there's no counterpunch, right? There's no improvisational Aaron Rodgers, Mahomes, Russell Wilson going to their second, third, fourth read. All of that mixes in, and I don't think Matt Nagy's done a very good job of that, and you could even blame some of the development of Mitch Trubisky on Matt Nagy. I wouldn't do that. I think Trubisky was just a bad prospect from the beginning. But yeah, I think he mostly gets a bad beat, but he also hasn't proved a whole lot. Most of the Bears' success has come on the defensive side of the ball with, in my opinion, two really good defensive coordinators, with Vic Fangio and it's Chuck Pagano now, who I have a lot of respect for. So yeah, Matt Nagy, 23rd. And then Ron Rivera at 22. I really like Ron Rivera, and I'm so happy to hear that his cancer treatment has finished, and it sounds like he is very healthy, which is great news. I think Ron Rivera is absolutely a top, coach, head coach caliber NFL coach. As far as his ceiling, I'm not all in on his ceiling. I think there's a chance where if he was surrounded by a really good organization, say Pittsburgh or Baltimore, he could be one of these Harbaugh, Tomlin coaches as that CEO type of guy. But that is kind of the problem with Rivera, is he hasn't had the success of those other two coaches we just named. He hasn't had the consistency of those other two coaches we just named as far as hiring the right coaches and having that organizational cohesion. Now, you can't really evaluate what's going on in Washington because that organization is in almost as much disarray as the New York Jets. But I think Ron Rivera, to me, is like the Teddy Bridgewater of quarterbacks in that he is or like the Ryan Fitzpatrick of quarterbacks, where he is a bridge coach for the Washington football team, where he's going to stabilize things. He can get you to be a really solid competitive football team. You could become a perennial playoff contender with Ron Rivera, though there was some inconsistencies with those Carolina days. But is he really going to elevate things to a high level, the ways that some of these top offensive coordinators do, the ways that some of these top defensive coordinators do? Frankly, I don't really think so. I think he's a really solid coach. He relates to the players and can stabilize an organization like Washington. But is it ultimately going to reach a point where if they did get a high-level quarterback, is he going to hold back their upside in a way? So I like Ron Rivera for a coach that can make your organization competent, but I wouldn't really rank him with the best and brightest of the head coaches in the league. Then we have Joe Judge at number 21. I've been spending a lot of time talking about Joe Judge for the New York Giants lately. I was completely, I guess, just waiting to see what he could do. I knew very little about Joe Judge. Most of us did know very little when they hired him. Almost to the point where it was unclear if he was going to be an offensive guy or a defensive guy. To me, it seems he's more of this CEO type of guy. He did special teams and receivers, I believe, for Belichick in New England. He's absolutely carried over that multiple 3-4 front defense that we've seen from teams like Flores and Patricia in Detroit, and even Tennessee down there is running a similar type of idea, all in that Belichick tree. So he's taken absolutely some of the Belichick defensive concepts. He's let Jason Garrett have a good handle on the offense as well, but I really do think Joe Judge has done a great job as that CEO type of coach in the Harbaugh, Tomlin mold, which can really work. The problem with that is you're never really going to elevate things on your own. I don't know if he's an offensive genius. I don't know if he's a defensive genius. We're still learning those things about him. So Joe Judge, I think, has done a really good job of getting the Giants to play hard and fast and together. Their defense specifically, which is, to me, where some of those things we just mentioned as far as discipline really come into play. So I've been really impressed with the defense under Joe Judge, whether he's an offensive guy or a defensive guy. And I think you could be pretty optimistic if you're a Giants fan to say, we got a pretty good coach on our hands here. He seems to have a pretty good grasp of the type of program he wants to run here for the Giants, really, which was kind of the problem with Shurmur there, was kind of the opposite. I think Shurmur is a really good offensive coordinator, but he didn't really have the organization under wraps as a head coach. So they really went the opposite direction there, and it seems to be working for the better for the Giants, which is an interesting kind of case experiment of would you rather have the genius coordinator who's not a people person or the people person who doesn't necessarily have the X's and O's. So then you have Matt Rule at number 20. I think this was another really good hire, who again is kind of taking the CEO mentality in Carolina. Now, there was actually a lot of confusion by myself and other fans of when he comes out of Baylor, which you think Big 12 Baylor offense, right? Like, this guy doesn't know a lick about defense. That's actually not true. He's been kind of a CEO type of guy going back to his Temple days through Baylor and now with Carolina. He has overseen the defense. He's overseen the offense. I think he fits in the same mold of Joe Brady, where we don't necessarily know exactly what sort of long-term type of coach is he going to be, an offensive guy, a defensive guy, or just a CEO type of guy that's going to let the coordinators he hires have control of those sides of the ball. It seems it's going to be the latter there, where he's kind of the CEO type of guy. But I'm buying in, absolutely. I think he made a great job hiring Joe Brady, and I think he's going to have to prove that he can do that again with the offensive coordinator, because I don't think Joe Brady's going to be around long in Carolina. I think he's going to be a top head coaching candidate, if not this year, certainly next year. So that's boosted up the perception of Matt Rule. And I also find it interesting that Matt Rule, just coming out of college, has a very strong, and having coached for two teams in recent memory, has a very strong grasp on the draft and young players coming to the league. We're seeing a guy in Sam Franklin. We're seeing him go and get a Robbie Anderson, who he coached at Temple. There's other players from Temple and Baylor that he has gone with as well. So he has kind of a leg up from a player evaluation standpoint early on, that the longer he's in the NFL, he's going to lose that grasp on. He's not going to know exactly who these guys are. So he's getting some contributions from guys at the college as rookies. So he's going to have to, show that he can continue to support a good offensive staff once Joe Brady leaves. I think that is inevitable. And also continue what is shown early to be a good ability to bring in guys like Robbie Anderson, Sam Franklin, and get the most out of more of these system type of players to fit them into the right scheme and make sure that you can get the most out of these guys. So I like what we've seen from Matt Rule. David Tepper, the owner there in Carolina, I think that this ranking for Rule could very well go up. Same thing for Joe Judge. Just some unknowns there. And then even some unknowns here with my 19th coach, and that is Kevin Stefanski. Stefanski is an interesting coach because he was around in Minnesota for a long time. He just never got that big promotion, and he finally got that nod here in Cleveland. So he's not just a Shanahan guy, but the coach that is there, the offensive coordinator for Minnesota right now. He's been around forever. Starts with an H, I think. Shoot, I wish I could draw this name right now. It's a big one. I'm just gonna move on. He was the head coach in Houston. Went to Denver. This is Kubiak, Gary Kubiak. There we go. I'm glad I got that because it's a big name. He's part of the Kyle Shanahan, Mike Shanahan tree with this outside zone, play action heavy offense that you're seeing in obviously San Francisco, the Rams, the Titans, the Packers, the Vikings still run it. It's a very popular scheme, and the Browns are replicating a lot of those concepts in Cleveland, but Stefanski isn't tied just to that scheme. He has worked for lots and lots of offensive coordinators. He can draw from a large breadth of knowledge, which I think is really going to benefit him and an ability to adjust. And he's going to have to show that ability this year with Odell Beckham going down. How does that offense change? He's had to adjust with Nick Chubb going down. So I think he is a very versatile offensive coordinator. But what's most important is he seems like a really solid head coach as well. He's another guy that's seen a lot of different head coaches. I'm pretty sure he was there for Leslie Frazier. He's been under Mike Zimmer, who's one of the all-time, maybe not all-time, but all-decade people-person head coaches. He's a very relatable head coach. I'm sure he's taking a lot of tendencies that he's seen under Mike Zimmer for the last 5-6+ years and applying that in Cleveland, which is really good stuff. So I'm a believer in Kevin Stefanski. We've seen a quick turnaround of the Browns under Stefanski. It seems like a really good hiring for Cleveland, and he's going to have an opportunity, I think, over the next couple of years to boost this ranking as well. and get into the mix for a group of really good coaches in the AFC North. I think very highly of Kevin Stefanski. It's just a little bit unproven at the moment. Then we have Vic Fangio at number 18. I think Vic Fangio is probably behind, I'm just kind of going through to make sure I don't say something stupid here, behind Belichick and potentially Mike Zimmer for the best defensive coordinator in the league. And I think Brian Flores is getting into that conversation as well. But I think Vic Fangio is just so established. He did incredible things with the nasty San Francisco defenses back in the day. And then he's even adjusted his scheme a little bit through his days in Chicago and now into Denver. And he's been dealt a rough hand this year because of all those injuries in Denver. But I just think Vic Fangio is a super established head coach. He understands that he's going to forfeit the offensive side of the ball. I think he did a great job hiring. I am struggling with the names today, man. I said his name earlier, the offensive coordinator. To be fair, this is a lot of names. Shurmur, Kyle Shurmur, who was the head coach for the Giants. He hired him to be the offensive coordinator, which is a perfect role for Shurmur. Now, Shurmur's been dealing with Drew Lock, has been hit or miss. They lost their number one receiver in Cortland Sutton. They got a bunch of rookie receivers out there. But I think Shurmur's done a pretty good job with the offense, all things considered. So I like the ability that, I got to revert to my list here. Vic Fangio has done with Shurmur to work out a really well-coached organization there. And they even hired the O-line coach from Pittsburgh as well, who's been just lights out there. And the offensive line in Denver has been much better than they've ever been. So I really just think Vic Fangio is a really solid coach. And if they didn't have so many injuries, he might have had a chance to really shine this year and make the Broncos an underrated team. I think they've really persevered the last couple weeks. They beat New England. They beat the Chargers. They've hung around despite all these injuries. So I think Vic Fangio is just a really solid coach. And then we have Bruce Arians, who I've actually always been a big Bruce Arians guy. He's just a very polarizing coach. He's very aggressive. He says some things that I think can tick some players off, but he'll say some things the players really like and relate to as well. It's just the schematics of Bruce Arians are what they are. We've seen that with Tom Brady. They haven't done a whole lot of adjusting. I would say they've run the ball a little more than normal under the Arians history, but they're still sticking with this vertical offense, and they're going to live or die by that, whether Tom Brady can execute that or not. And for the most part, Tom Brady has shown that he can. But schematically, that's what they want to do. They want to push the ball downfield, and that's the point of the Bruce Arians offense. I like that he has Todd Bowles there. His defensive coordinator is one of the best defensive minds in the NFL again. So it's just a really solid coach. Has never popped to me as an elite head coach, but I think Bruce Arians is fantastic. I don't really want to speak down on him. I'm sure some Bucs fans and former Cardinals fans would say that Arians maybe should be a little higher on this list. I wouldn't necessarily disagree with you. I've just been more impressed with what the other guys have done to this point. So Mike Vrabel is going to come in next at 16. Vrabel is a defensive mind. He's a former defensive player for Belichick. He worked under Bill O'Brien in Houston. Seems he's a much better head coach than Bill O'Brien. Vrabel, to me, just is a culture dude. He gets the Titans to play hard and fast. Not the most talented team, but he's done more than I expected him to do in Tennessee. The offense has thrived under Vrabel, with Arthur Smith, to me, being a top head coach candidate this year. How do the Titans look if they do lose Arthur Smith under Mike Vrabel? That, to me, is a question mark. And honestly, the defense itself has underwhelmed this year. I think it's more of a personnel problem there in Tennessee. Their pass rush is so-so. Their coverage unit is so-so from a talent perspective. But overall, I think they're very well coached. They play so tough. The best thing I could say about Mike Vrabel is they play up to their competition. Look no further than beating the Baltimore Ravens in the playoffs last year. Going to the AFC Championship was just shattered expectations. So I like Vrabel's ability to get this team to play hard and fast, which is very important. It's an underrated aspect of coaching, is getting your team to come out ready to go. Now, there's been some stinkers in there for Tennessee. Look no further than last week against Cincinnati, but I'm comfortable with Vrabel right around there at the 16 spot. And then Mike, not Mike Flores. the names are just not rolling off the tongue right now. Brian Flores, thank you. Thanks you to my brain for drawing that one. Yeah, so Brian Flores has been incredible with the Dolphins. I got to give him so much respect. I've been tough on the Dolphins front office point of view, and honestly, I would still remain tough. Some of those moves have really worked out, and Flores has worked with the front office to bring in some of these good fits, but some of these guys like Ogba has been such a great fit for them. They've brought in a bunch of linebackers that are playing really well. The secondary has looked outstanding there. The defense is put together here under Flores, and he is really replicating the Belichick defense. You've got these hybrid outside linebackers. You're looking at Vince Beagle last year, Van Ginkel this year, the two Wisconsin guys. They just pump out these Belichickian 3-4 outside linebackers. And then you've got, obviously, Kyle Van Noy, who they bring in from New England. They're very much replicating the Belichick defense, and it's working. They're very man-heavy. They run a ton of man. They have built from the corners up to the safety spot and down, and it's absolutely working to replicate that Belichick defense. And offensively, they've been pretty solid. I would need to do some more research as to who the coordinator is there for Miami. He's doing a very good job, and if he's going to get head coaching opportunities here, I don't see that likely right now. But anytime you have a defensive head coach, you're going to be worried about losing the offensive coordinator. It's been a big problem for Mike Zimmer over the years, is he consistently replaces the offensive coordinator with these great minds, but if that's happening every 2 years, it's just going to be hit or miss, and that can be a flaw of these defensive-minded head coaches sometimes. So you're going to see definitely a shift towards offensive coordinators on this list, and I think that's justified because offense is king in the NFL. But certainly these defensive-minded coaches weren't at a loss. Like they can be really good coaches. So really impressed with what Flores has done with not a ton of talent down there in Miami. They are legitimate playoff contenders this year, which I did not give them a chance at making the playoffs this year. I thought they were a year away, and they're in the mix. I don't think they'll make it, but they're very much in the mix, and I think Brian Flores deserves so much of that credit. All right, next up, Cliff Kingsbury. I'm kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out on Cliff. They seem to be getting that offense working. I do like Cliff Kingsbury. I just think that there's a lot to prove, especially from a defensive perspective. They're showing some improvements on that side of the ball. But even on the offensive side of the ball, I thought that they would open up the offense quicker this year. It's still been a very horizontal offense for the most part, but over the last few weeks, they've been pushing that ball downfield, getting Kyler more integrated into that part of the game and opening up this offense. Cliff, to me, just has a lot more to prove. I think the fact that he's ranked 14th here shows a lot about his offensive prowess, but I think as far as the CEO part of being a head coach, I think you go back to Texas Tech days, that was in question, was how good of a program can he put together. We know he can coach offense, but I think he still needs to prove that at the NFL level. And then Mike Zimmer's going to come in 13th, and that's a fall for him. I've had him as a top 10 coach for a long time. We talked about the NFL being about adjusting and not being one of these old stubborn coaches that are kind of in your way. They see the game in a 2005 lens and not a 2020 lens. And I think Zimmer's done a decent job at that, but there's some of that in there with Zimmer. He wants to be a run-heavy team. He knows he's a defensive guy. And it's just hard when he does, for the most part, do a really good job at hiring offensive coordinators. But when you're constantly losing that guy, you lose Shurmur 2 years ago, you lose Stefanski last year, you got to go to Kubiak, who's been hit or miss this year. It's just really hard to sustain that. So you credit him for finding those coaches, but the fact that he is purely defense does hurt him a little bit on this ranking. He can be very stubborn with young players. It seems he has a hard time working with young players, especially in the secondary, where he runs a very multiple scheme. He will run cover 4 one play, cover 2 the next play, cover 3 the play after that, and then he'll mix in a weird blitz. Like, he will do a lot of different things under his 4-3 scheme, and when you ask all those different coverages, I would say they're up there for the most well-split teams as far as what kinds of coverages they run. That puts a lot of pressure on a young corner. This is, it's not Seattle where you're running cover 3 all the time, or Miami where you're running man coverage half the time. You got to know a lot of different coverages. So I would say that he has a hard time, working with young corners and safeties on that end and getting them to understand it, as any coach would when that's your scheme, but also not adjusting that. If you're going to have all these young first and second year corners, maybe you should simplify your scheme a little bit. And I think Zimmer's kind of learning the hard way this year that you can't have it both ways. You either stack it with veterans or you find ways to keep guys like Rhodes and Waynes and Mackenzie Alexander, who were getting kind of roasted last year, which is why they let them go, but they at least knew what they were doing schematically. So either find a way to keep those guys, or if you're going to get all these young corners in there, change your scheme to be a little more simple. So there's been some red flags with Zimmer, but for the most part, I think he's an excellent head coach. You got to give him credit for finding an offensive coordinator seemingly every year that wants to be hired by somebody. And beyond that, he's just a really likable coach. I think most of the players there love Mike Zimmer, and I don't see him going anywhere anytime soon, despite them having a rough season. Then I have, sticking in the NFC North, Matt Lefleur, who has really impressed me. The biggest knock on Lefleur is the losses that he's had have been blowouts, and he has really gone against some of the best and brightest the league has to offer and gotten really outcoached and dominated. And that's the biggest thing holding him back. But if you were able to throw out the Tampa Bay game last year, the 2 Niners games last year, the Chargers game last year, which you can't. That's the reason he's not a top 10 coach. But if you look at his other body of work, he has completely flipped this entire program around. He has overhauled this team. They have basically been better at everything under Lefleur than they were under McCarthy. Play calling is so much more creative. Rodgers is so much more in sync with him as a play caller, especially in year 2 here. You're seeing the blocking be better. And despite at times it not looking great, you're seeing the defense play much better. The pass rush has been better. The coverage has been better. The tackling's been better, which says a lot because it's not been great. I think you got to look at Mike Payton and how much longer does he stand there in Green Bay. And obviously the front office that, in my opinion, it's not even a debate. Like, they are by a country mile the worst front office in the NFL amidst legitimate Super Bowl contenders. They are all conservative, no action at all. Like, they stood there with their thumbs in their ass about, should Will Fuller be brought in here to help them win a Super Bowl this year? Yeah, he should. You wasted your second-round pick last year. Don't tell me that's too much for Will Fuller. You literally spent a second-round pick on a 245-pound running back who's now your third string. So don't tell me a second-round pick is too much for Will Fuller. So the front office is just terrible here, which does not help. So I've been overall very impressed with Matt Lefleur. I think what he's done on the offensive side of the ball, you can't argue with it. Now, you wish he could adjust his game plan a little more and match when he does get answered by teams like San Francisco and Tampa Bay. But at the same time, when you fall behind early because your defense sucks and your front office doesn't give you any receivers to work with, and part of that's on Lefleur for what he tells the front office he wants, but I think Lefleur probably wanted Will Fuller. It was the front office that said no. But yeah, when you fall behind and you don't have explosiveness on that side of the ball, you can only run outside zone and play action boots so many times when you're down by 2 scores. So I would point more to the front office on that one. Then we have Frank Reich at number 11, just missing the top 10. Just isn't quite accomplished as a head coach. I think he's got a great opportunity this year to get into the top 10. I honestly can't say a bad thing about Frank Reich. I think he does such a good job schematically. Phillip Rivers is a really good fit for what they want to do. They want to run the ball a lot. They want to run a lot of RPOs. They want to run a short to intermediate passing game. And what they've done on the defensive side of the ball has been really impressive as well. Matt Eberflus has been great under Frank Reich. I don't know if Eberflus is in that sweet spot where he's not going to get a head coach offer, or if he is going to leave and become a head coach. But if they are able to retain Eberflus for a long time, the Colts are set up for a lot of success. The thing is, they just need to find out a long-term answer at quarterback. But Phillip Rivers and Frank Reich in the last few weeks have really started clicking. And that's a relationship that I think was always going to take a little bit of time, but I think that's impressive to show that they've been able to figure that out. So Frank Reich, to me, just a little bit unproven. I do give him credit for a lot of the success in Philadelphia when they won that Super Bowl. And they've done such a great job on both sides of the ball of getting the most out of players that were a little bit unexpected. Through the draft with guys like Braden Smith, Darius Leonard, you look at this year, Julian Blackmon, and then bringing in guys and developing guys like Mo Alley Cox. They bring in Xavier Rhodes, who's been fantastic. There's a long list of stuff like that. The right guard, Glowinski, they found from, I think, Seattle's practice squad, or they cut him and waived him or something like that. But they've done just such a good job working with that front office, finding good scheme fits. And I think Frank Reich deserves a lot of credit for that, though just missing the top 10. Then we got Sean McDermott for the Buffalo Bills. He has been the consummate culture builder for the Buffalo Bills. Talk about getting the most out of unexpected pieces. The offensive line has come together under Sean McDermott, which is fantastic. They've and you got to mix in the front office decisions as well, but I think McDermott very much has a say in the types of personnel decisions they make. But overall, they've improved the offensive line to a huge extent. You look at guys like what Darrell Williams is doing for them this year. You look at John Feliciano at right guard. They've really boosted up that offensive line. They've got Cole Beasley, John Brown to play some of their best football. They've developed Josh Allen. Probably Sean McDermott's biggest accomplishment is to take this raw, high potential, elite level athlete and make him a quarterback, a guy that reads defenses, makes better decisions, plays more in rhythm, starts to slow the game down. I know McDermott is, from my understanding, more of a defensive-minded guy, but he certainly takes this CEO approach, and I would find it moronic to have an argument that he hasn't overseen the overall development of his quarterback, Josh Allen. So you got to give him a ton of credit on that side of the ball. Now, defense hasn't been that great this year. I think they really feed off of that home crowd that they're really missing this year, especially for a pass rush that's not been very good this year. I do worry about the development of a guy in Ed Oliver, Tremaine Edmonds, who are more raw prospects. That is a blemish, let's just say, on Sean McDermott's defensive repertoire, but they've done good jobs at other parts of the defense, getting the most out of certain guys. So McDermott's done a great job building this team. They've taken the Bills from a bit of a laughingstock, a bottom feeder, if you will, to a super competitive team. Looks like they're going to win the AFC East. I think they're maybe a year away from and more development from some of those guys, especially on the defensive side of the ball, away from being legitimate Super Bowl contenders. But McDermott, without a doubt, has been outstanding, and he's not going anywhere anytime soon. All right, then we have Pete Carroll at number 9. Maybe this is too low for Pete Carroll. This comes back to the whole being an old school defensive-minded coach, seeing the game from a different lens. Now, he has been absolutely forced with no choice to adjust his offense this year. You look over the last 4 years, that has not been the case. They've wanted to run the ball and play defense, but Pete Carroll, at least to his credit this year, has looked at this and said, we need to open up this offense, trust Russell Wilson, acknowledge that this defense isn't going to be great. The reason Pete Carroll is dropping here is that defense has been a concern now for about 2 years, and he is very much a high-end decision maker. If he isn't the primary decision maker on roster decisions and draft decisions, it's at least a 50-50 split between him and the GM there, John Schneider. And you look at their draft decisions, it's been really bad. They haven't really built that defense through the draft, other than the Shaquem? I always screw this up. Whichever one the corner is. I mean, you go around the board, no one on the D-line has worked out. The LJ Collier first-round pick from last year has been a nightmare. You look at the linebackers, the guys they've drafted haven't worked out yet. I think Jordan Brooks and Barton, I think those guys have a chance to work out, but they haven't to this point. In the secondary, again, Griffin's been solid, but they didn't draft Jamal Adams. They didn't draft the Texas safety that they traded for from Detroit. They didn't draft Quentin Dunbar. It's really been the trades and bringing in established veterans that they know are scheme fits based on what they've done in the NFL that has worked out. So I'm really worried about what Pete Carroll has shown, the inability to develop guys through the draft on the defensive side of the ball. That's supposed to be a big thing for Pete Carroll. And I don't know if his scheme is getting outdated and teams are catching up, or he just isn't seeing the game through a modern lens. But there's a lot of things that Pete Carroll has done that has really bothered me that leads me to rank some of these other guys ahead of him. I still think he's one of the most relatable coaches. I don't think he's going anywhere anytime soon. And certainly a top 10 ranking is not a disrespect to keep Pete Carroll. I just think other coaches are bringing more to the table right now. And honestly, I don't think Seahawks fans are all that crazy about Pete Carroll. I think Pete Carroll, Mike Zimmer, they're kind of in the same boat where like their fans are okay with them, but they're not like pounding the table that this guy is an elite head coach right now. Let's move on to the next guy, number 8, John Gruden. Gruden has impressed me so much, and it started early on with the initial integration of good play calling, a scheme that really works with Derek Carr, the short to intermediate passing game, getting rid of the ball quickly, running the ball well, immediately making that offensive line, restoring it to what it was in 2015, 2016, where it was one of the best in the league, identifying the talent of a guy in Richie Incognito, getting him to come in and scrap his past debacles, whatever that was all about several years ago that led to him being out of the league, and then bringing in Trent Brown, and it's just immediately patching that offensive line, and even developing a left tackle that his name always escapes me, the UCLA guy that they spent the 15th pick on 2 years ago. He's developed there as well. So, the offense has been such a growth under John Gruden. They are one of the most cohesive, well-schemed offenses in the league. They have such a great identity, and Derek Carr is a great fit for that offense. You can question the upside of that offense. I think if they can really get Henry Ruggs healthy and consistently integrated into the play calling there where they take those calculated shots from a vertical perspective, and we haven't even mentioned the tight end. So many names in this podcast, it's like drilling into my brain. Darren Waller. We haven't even mentioned Gruden finding him and turning him into one of the game's top weapons on offense. So he's just done such a good job with this offense. But beyond that, I got to give credit to Gruden for at least establishing a culture on the defensive side of the ball. I have absolutely shredded Gruden and Mayock for some of their draft decisions. I think the Cleveland Ferrell pick was a disaster and will always be a disaster, but he does play hard. I think the Jonathan Abram pick was a disaster and always was bad value, but he does play hard. I think Damon Arnett, same thing. I think he lacks the athletic upside to be a top corner in this league. It wasn't worth that pick, but he does play hard. The linebackers, they've brought in leaders on that side of the ball. Kwiatkowski's been great for them. Lamarcus Joyner plays very hard, though he lacks physical traits. Although I don't know if that's fair. He's very fast. He's a good slot corner. But I question why they aren't playing him at free safety. They've made some very questionable roster decisions on the defensive side of the ball, and I don't think they've proved the ability to fix that, and I think until they do, it's never going to be an elite defense. But with the way they're coached on offense and the way that they're playing on defense as at least a bend, don't break, aggressive, disciplined defense, that could work if Derek Carr can give you 4 straight elite performances, which when you're Derek Carr, that's kind of unlikely. But I really am buying into the culture, and I have been buying into the culture in Las Vegas for a while now. I wish they made smarter draft decisions as far as using value. Like if you're going to target a Cleveland Ferrell, trade down. If you're going to target Damon Arnett, trade down, get more picks. And trading away Lynn Bowden before you even get to see him on a football field in a year where there's no preseason. You spent was it a third-round pick? I think they spent a third-round pick on him, and then before the season even starts, they trade him for a future fourth. Like, that kind of stuff just doesn't add up from a value perspective. They're leaving meat on the bones, so to speak. And I say they because Gruden is very much hands-on with the roster decisions. But I will say the whole Gruden grinder, what was the knock on wood if you're with me from Hard Knocks, like, he has these guys bought in. He clearly has a good grasp on the types of characters he wants in the building here. And I think we're seeing it work. If they had more talent on the defensive side of the ball, which comes back to the roster decisions, they'd be a really freaking good football team. So Gruden's going to come in at number 8. He's done a great job. Then Mike Tomlin at number 7. And Jim Harbaugh is going to be number 6. These guys are so similar. And Harbaugh did such a good job last year and was in the conversation for being a top coach. Both Tomlin and Harbaugh have limited upsides because they don't have a specialty. And you're going to see years where they really do have a great game plan for the season, like Harbaugh last year, who did such a good job hiring the right staff, having a vision for the team, having a vision for the personnel decisions, and executing it. But the problem is Harbaugh doesn't on his own elevate the offense. He doesn't on his own elevate the defense. He does technically elevate the special teams because that's his specialty. And same thing kind of goes for Tomlin. Tomlin is a little more of a defensive-minded coach. But yeah, man, both these guys are outstanding head coaches. So much success, so much consistency. They are relatable coaches. The players love these guys. They make the right coaching hirings and evaluate talent at a really high level. And I think that is worthy of a top 7 ranking. But we've seen at times for both of these guys where when things don't go right and maybe they do make a wrong hire here, or they have a couple injuries here or there, they're not really able to do some of the things that these next 5 coaches can do as far as lifting up certain pieces on offense or defense that just aren't supposed to be very good players, which I think is, to me, the most valuable thing you can bring to the table as a head coach is being so schematically smart with the X's and O's of football that you can take an undrafted rookie free agent or a 28-year-old veteran that's never done anything in the league and consistently identify their skill sets and put them into your scheme. Tomlin and Harbaugh have a good feel for what their schemes are and identifying that talent, but they aren't hands-on with that, which just widens that gap a little bit. So that brings us into the top 5, and I think all 5 of these coaches are really good at doing that, which again is identifying a specific skill set for really low-level investment players, guys like undrafted free agents and long-term veterans, bringing them into your scheme and making them really good football players. So that starts to me with Sean McVay. This year's been really impressive for Sean McVay. They've had some ups and downs, but coming into the year, we kind of knew that, okay, they paid Jared Goff, they paid Aaron Donald, they're going to have to pay Jalen Ramsey. They don't have a ton of draft picks because they traded for those guys, or at least for Jalen Ramsey. And I feel like I'm tilting my head like this the entire show. Sorry if I look weird. But, yeah, he's done such a good job of repairing this offensive line, getting guys like Darius Williams to ball out on defense. Guys like Leonard Floyd looks like a good addition on defense. They made a defensive coordinator change for the better. You got to credit Sean McVay. That was not an easy decision to move on from Wade Phillips, I'm sure. And that looks like it's for the best. And we knew coming into the year that when you don't have a lot of high draft picks, you're going to need some of those guys to step up, and it's absolutely happening. So I think Sean McVay has shown such a strong grasp of that scheme. He even adjusted that scheme a little bit. He comes out week 1 and comes up with this idea of we are going to basically break huddle, run up to the line of scrimmage, and snap this thing. We are going to make everything look the same as we always have through our Shanahan, McVay outside zone scheme. But the difference is we're not even going to give you a second to see what we're going to do. We're going to break huddle, run up the line of scrimmage, and snap the ball as soon as we possibly can. And that's really worked for this offense. A lot of defenses have had no idea how to handle this thing. So credit Sean McVay for being creative with the offensive scheme and knowing culturally what he needs to do. I think Sean McVay has reestablished himself as a premier coach in this league. And that's doing it with Jared Goff, which is, again, pretty impressive to me. Getting paid $36 million, which is not easy. So then we have Sean Payton, number 4. He's just such a mainstay. Such a mainstay. He's missing the playoff success of some of these other guys. He's missing, that's really it. I mean, he has shown that later in the season he hasn't been quite as good as guys like Reid and Shanahan and Belichick in recent memory, and that's really the only reason he's not in that category. I think he's done a great job with Drew Brees, getting creative with Taysom Hill. Done such a good job recently with guys like Deontay Harris. I give him a ton of credit. Sean Payton is so good at taking these guys that are overlooked because they don't fit a certain archetype. That's another thing that all these coaches do super well is they'll identify players. Look at Sean McVay with Darius Williams. Oh, he's a 5'9" corner. He can't play outside. The NFL would say Darius Williams, 5'9", he can't play outside. Deontay Harris for the Saints, he's 5'7". You can't play him as an actual receiver. He's just a kick returner. Darius Williams, he's just a slot corner. Well, guys like McVay, Sean Payton, they're willing to say, you're really good at these things. If I put you in this position, your height, size, weight, speed, whatever it is, are not going to get exposed. And Sean Payton on the offensive side of the ball is so good at that. He's done that with a weird player in Taysom Hill who's played a little bit of everything. You've seen it with Deontay Harris. He has turned Michael Thomas, who, say what you want about him being a top 3 receiver or whatever, he is a very one-dimensional player. He is, to use the words of Malcolm Jenkins, he is slant boy. Pretty much. Like, it might be a little unfair. Like, yeah, he can run some outs, he can run some crossers, but he's not a deep threat. He is slant boy. He is a short route beast. And Sean Payton said, so what? We'll throw you 200 slants on the season, and we know you're going to catch all of them. So Sean Payton is so good at thinking creative with players that have been, let's just say, afforded to him because the rest of the league has dismissed their talents and their physical profiles. Defensively, he just hasn't brought much to the table. The Saints defense has, for the most part, underwhelmed. They've had incredible rosters like last year and the year before where their defense was really good. The roster talent has dropped off a little bit this year, and it's suffering. He doesn't bring much to that side of the ball as far as hiring and getting those guys on the right page. He's all offense. Then you go Andy Reid, number 3. This one's controversial. A lot of people would make Andy Reid number 1. I think Reid is a part of a beautiful machine in Kansas City right now. I think the front office is spectacular. I think their quarterback is spectacular. And I think the coach is spectacular. All these things work in unison. Without Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid's not the best coach in football. Without a front office that is really smart and aggressive and creative with the cap and identifies talent like Tyreek Hill and Willie Gay and Kareem Hunt, and taking chances on guys like that. Without that, Andy Reid isn't a top 1 head coach. But you're getting to the point where you're splitting hairs with these top 3, honestly. Reid I rank 3rd because I just think the other 2 have impressed me more with what they've accomplished, with what they've had, what they've been given, what they've been dealt with. Like I said, Reid has had Mahomes to work with. He has had a great front office. When he had Alex Smith, he wasn't able to do some of these things. So Reid's going to rank 3rd. If you want to disagree with that, that's perfectly fine by me. Bill Belichick's still going to come in number 2, but I'm wavering on Bill. And this is the first time I've officially made a statement that Bill Belichick is not the best coach in football. Now, you want to look from a historical standpoint, I think what Bill Belichick has accomplished over the last 20 years in a salary cap-driven league where this isn't basketball, baseball, where you can buy your players, where there's basically no salary cap, and establish a dynasty because you're a big market team. That's not the NFL. You got to be creative if you are going to sustain a dynasty in the NFL, and that is what Bill Belichick has done. He's constantly adapted his teams. He has found value where no one thought was possible. The problem here is, number 1, he's defensive head coach, and the offense right now is really suffering from that. And number 2 is he has not done a great job building this roster for 2018, 2019, 2020. They've completely whiffed on receivers. And Keel Harry, I thought was a miserable pick. Sonny Michel was one of the worst picks of the last few years in the first round. They haven't made the same types of trades that they historically have. I think the last great trade they made was the Trent Brown trade, which was 2017, I think. So from a roster building standpoint, Bill Belichick is kind of this superhero GM coach. He just hasn't had all of that. Now, he did some amazing things on defense last year. It's why he's still number 2. But you are seeing some flaws from Bill Belichick. That's the only reason you're going to explain why right now he's not the number 1 coach in football. But to me, the number 1 coach in football is Kyle Shanahan, who people like to hate on Kyle Shanahan because he hasn't won a Super Bowl yet, and he's collapsed, quote unquote, in 2 Super Bowls now. I don't look so much into that. I more see it as he's been to 2 Super Bowls in the last 4 years, and he's done it really against expectations. So I go back to his last year in Atlanta. Clearly Atlanta screwed up. I said it at the time. They should have let Dan Quinn go and keep Kyle Shanahan. I mean, he made Matt Ryan an MVP. He made the Atlanta Falcons the best offense in the NFL and legitimate Super Bowl contenders. So there was that. And then he gets to San Francisco. They were one of the worst teams in football. And kind of a lost season. They didn't have a quarterback. They go and trade for Jimmy G. They get Jimmy G, and they go undefeated. And to the next season with a ton of hype. And unfortunately, Jimmy G goes down in the second week of the season, so another lost season. But even in that year, you saw some really special wins. That team be ultra competitive. You started to see the breakout of George Kittle and started to see this scheme kind of come together. Then the next year, it explodes, unstoppable on offense, despite injuries. And now in year 4, it's been hit or miss because of all these injuries. It's injuries and late game comebacks, which are just fluky things, have, let's just say, skewed the way the general NFL public perceives Kyle Shanahan. He makes everything look the same. He does such a good job of bringing in guys like Debo, Kittle, Ayuk, the running backs, everyone. They're just these rack machines. They're so difficult to tackle. His teams block so well. He showed last year the ability to elevate offensive tackles, which is difficult to do with guys like Daniel Brunskill and some random left tackle that I can't think of his name right now. They played really well when their 2 tackles went out. It's been so plug and play with this offense. Now, again, the injuries, man. They've had Jimmy Garoppolo out for pretty much the majority of Kyle Shanahan's career at this point. He needs to get an established quarterback in there. He's had ball carriers and offensive line banged up left and right. Defensively, they've suffered tons of injuries. But that is another wrinkle in Shanahan here, is not only is he, in my mind, the best offensive coordinator in the NFL, and guys like Reid and Payton are certainly close, but to me, what Sean McVay does from a play calling perspective is just so special. But it's not just that. What has happened on the defensive side of the ball under Kyle Shanahan? He has found an excellent defensive coordinator in Robert Saleh. He has done a great job personnel-wise of bringing in guys. He has a very large say in that front office with Lynch, who is fantastic in his own right. But what they've been able to do on the defensive side of the ball to complement that offense gives Shanahan the nod, in my opinion. I think you look at guys like Andy Reid's done fine with that defense, but it has not been what Kyle Shanahan has. And then, guys like Sean Payton, like, they just haven't been the CEO type of coach that Kyle Shanahan has been. So again, he's had bad beats. He's lost 2 tragic, Super Bowl fourth quarter leads, and now he's had, in my opinion, 2 of his. The first season's kind of a wash. Like, they weren't really prepared to win the first season. So let's just say 2 of the last 3 seasons where there's been real expectations for Shanahan have been lost due to injuries to their quarterback, among other players. So I think he's gotten some really bad luck. I think that's eventually going to shift back the other way. The whole quarterback situation with Jimmy G, do they go forward with him? Was his bad play due to injury? All that's up in the air, but I do know that Kyle Shanahan is going to be able to find himself a quarterback with or without Jimmy Garoppolo. It's just a matter of when and if that happens. But yeah, man, Kyle Shanahan to me, the number one coach in the NFL, officially for the first time, announcing that here on the channel. So there's your coaching rankings. I'm going to take a short break, and then when we come back, we're going to start going through those standings and recap my preseason predictions and where I was right and where I was wrong. Alrighty then, let's get into the fun stuff. This is going to be where I was right, where I was wrong. I got to be careful. I don't want to sound full of myself here. This is something a lot of people have requested I do, so I'm assuming this is something you want. I think it's sometimes when you do this stuff, you can sound kind of like an egomaniac. I'm just trying to reflect on what my predictions were, and that said, I'm very proud of where my predictions were. We're going to go through team by team here, and then we'll readjust, sort of reprojecting with our new information here. But I'm not going to lie, man. Looking at my predictions from my August preseason full prediction show, I'm incredibly proud of where we're sitting right here. Obviously, there were some misses. There's always going to be some misses. When you reflect on what the comments were at the time, and now looking back on it, I'm pretty damn proud of these predictions and where we came in this year. So let's start with the NFC North, as we did in that video. So I had Green Bay 12-4, Minnesota 9-7, Chicago 8-8, and Detroit 6-10. I think that's shaping out very well. The obvious difference there is Chicago has a nice lead on Minnesota right now. But I will say Minnesota is going to benefit from the more easier schedule that Chicago had early on. I think that gap is going to tighten. But what's most important to me there is Minnesota was very, very well liked heading into the season. And I said the fact that people have them as favorites for the division, the fact that people think that Green Bay is some 8-8 team and that Minnesota should be the favorite for this division, and if not them, Chicago. I said, I don't know, man. I think Minnesota could be in for a rough season here with the young secondary and all this stuff. And I faded them before the season started. I'm very glad I did that. Now, I don't think they get to 9-7. I think they will finish with a much better record than where they sit right now. And I wouldn't be stunned if it came out that Minnesota actually finished above Chicago. But I think those guys will be tight in the middle, around 500. Chicago might get to 9-10 wins. They've won some close games that I wasn't predicting. As for Detroit at 6-10, I think that's very sound. And then Green Bay at 12-4. Honestly, the way things look, their second half schedule is actually pretty easy. They have a lot of home games, and they also are better at this point in the season than I expected. So the NFC North, I think I really had down to a T. I wouldn't change much for those predictions at all, except for maybe flip Chicago, say they go 9-7, and then Minnesota maybe goes 7-9 instead of 9-7. But really proud of the way I predicted the NFC North. I caught a lot of flack for that prediction, for having Green Bay as an overwhelming favorite to win that division, and I don't think you would change that at all. And then you have the NFC East. So I had this one I got a lot of flack for too. I had the Giants at the bottom at 1-15. This pissed so many people off. And the Giants right now, I want to confirm that they have just one win on the season. Let's see. Yeah, they're 1-7. And their schedule is very hard. That is why I predicted them to only go 1-15. Now, I think they get up to 2 or 3 wins. But the point I'm making here is they were a really bad football team coming into the season, and that has shown. And that Daniel Jones was going to continue to be a problem. And Giants fans were pissed that I said that. Giants fans thought they had a chance to win this division, and maybe they do because the division is so bad. But honestly, man, Detroit, the Giants kind of with a Detroit season, to be honest. But yeah, really proud of that prediction with the Giants at 1-15. Then we had Washington at 4-12. That looks pretty accurate. Where we were wrong here was Philly and Dallas. Now, you can honestly point to injuries on this one. Now, I don't think even healthy Philly and Dallas teams, were going to win 10 games. But the order of the division here looks pretty accurate to me. Philly 1, Dallas 2, Washington 3, and the Giants 4. So we got that at least right. Dallas is falling apart for injuries. Dak, the offensive line, completely in shambles. McCarthy's been a complete train wreck. I did say I thought McCarthy was going to be an upgrade to Jason Garrett. That actually looks like that might not be true. And then Philly, I would say Doug Peterson continues to be a problem. Carson Wentz being the biggest surprise here. I thought Carson Wentz was going to be an MVP candidate. I will admit I was wrong on that. Carson Wentz, I'm just kind of done. For the last 2 years, I've been predicting that he's going to get healthy and get back to that MVP form that we saw, and it just hasn't happened. I'm not going to rule that out of him getting back to being a top 8 quarterback, but it seems incredibly unlikely at this point. The regression has just been crazy. He leads the NFL in turnover-worthy plays, but I do think Doug Peterson's play calling has been miserable. They haven't had much help from a playmaker perspective. But yeah, the order there was correct. I think Dallas won. God, I am misspeaking so much on this podcast, and I apologize. Philly 1, Dallas 2, way above Washington and the Giants. If health was in order, if Dallas and Philly weren't 2 of the most injured teams in the league, I think those would look much more similar. And then the NFC South, very proud of these predictions as well, especially at the top. So I had New Orleans 1 at 12-4, Tampa Bay 2 at 10-6. And then I had Atlanta at 7-9 and Carolina at 2-4. So there's some misses here. It actually looks like Tampa Bay is going to win this division. But what I'm proud of here is I said, and as we look at my playoff predictions later, I said that Tampa Bay was going to start slow and finish very strong. Now, New Orleans has been worse than I expected. And if New Orleans was what I thought, I think that prediction would have held up and that New Orleans would win the division, but come to January, Tampa Bay would be a much better team. So I'm proud of that outlook for Tampa Bay. The standings haven't reflected that. I think, well, actually, if you look at the actual standings, they're both, Saints are 5-2, Bucks are 6-2. This is by no stretch of the imagination over as far as this race. But I do project Tampa Bay to win this division. I think they're a better football team. New Orleans at 12-4, I think they do get to 10 or 11 wins. As for at the bottom here, a little bit of a miss. Carolina's been much better than I expected. The offense has been a smidgen better than I thought. I thought they'd be solid on offense. And the defense has been much better than I expected under Rule. And these young players really stepping up. The future outlook for Carolina I always liked. I just didn't think they'd be very good this year. They've been much more competitive than I thought, so I'll give them credit for that. Atlanta at 7-9. Honestly, man, I'm really not going to apologize for that. They've had these crazy fourth quarter gaffes. I didn't think Dan Quinn was a good coach coming in. I thought they should have fired him. That's held up. 7-9. I didn't think that they would be some playoff team. A couple of these games go the other way. They're probably on course for a 7-9 season. So I'm not going to apologize for that one. But it is looking like they're probably going to finish with maybe 4 or 5 wins instead of 7 or 9. All right, NFC West. Again, really proud of this one. So I had Seattle in first place at 11-5, San Francisco in second in place at 11-5, the Rams in third place at 10-6, which was not well perceived based on the comments of this video, and then the Cardinals at 8-8 in fourth place. So again, I'm very proud of these, and if I think I was way off, I will admit that. But through the first 4 divisions, I think my predictions were very, very solid. So Seattle at first place was not an unpopular pick, but there was obviously people picking the Niners. There was even a couple of people picking the Cardinals. Looks like Seattle's going to finish as the best team in the NFC West. I don't think there's a whole lot of disagreement there. I've been pretty much spot on with what Seattle's going to look like as far as hopefully opening the passing game up a little bit more, letting Russ cook, and then the defense not being all that good. They've been pretty much exactly what I expected them to be. And I also said in this video, I think I snuck in there that Russ was my favorite to win the MVP, which is also holding up very well. So Seattle looks like a spot-on prediction. And then San Francisco, I'm not going to apologize for this one. 11-5, saying that they were going to come down a little bit, which they clearly have, not win their division as the defending NFC champs. That alone was not a bold prediction. I think that was a lot of people were doing that, but at least below what Niners fans would have expected. Let's just say that. The injury report for the San Francisco Niners is unbelievable. And I'm sure there's people that are sick and tired of the Niners getting excuses with these, fourth quarter blown leads for Shanahan, all the injuries. But at some point that just is too much to handle. Right now, Jimmy Garoppolo, done probably for the season, it looks like. George Kittle might be done for the season. Those are the 2 most integral parts of that offense. They've barely had Deebo Samuel, who's been a critical part of that offense, was a major reason they broke out last year on offense. He's been out. On the defensive side of the ball, keep in mind this was probably the best defense in the NFL last year. Nick Bosa has been out almost all season. Dee Ford has been out, I want to say almost this whole season. I think he played like week 1. So your two best pass rushers are gone, not contributing here. That pass rush was what let that defense thrive. And on top of that, Richard Sherman, who was by far their best cover guy last year, has been out for the season. So just the defense, the injuries and the positions and players that they're losing. I mean, you could seriously make a case that they lost their 3 most impactful offensive players. Obviously, their quarterback, George Kittle, and Deebo Samuel. I don't think that's all that controversial. If you wanted to throw anyone into that conversation, it'd be Raheem Mostert, who hasn't been out there a whole lot. And then on defense, obviously Nick Bosa, the best player on that defense. I would say Sherman is third behind Fred Warner, who's been outstanding this year. And then, Dee Ford was actually pretty good in that rotational role last year, and DeForest Buckner was fifth, and they had to let him go. So I think this is a pretty deep, all things considered with the injuries, I'm not going to apologize for having the Niners as a wild card team coming into the season when they were the favorites to win that division. And then the Rams at 10-6, again, very proud of that. I thought the Rams would bounce back. Fans were selling the Rams so hard. I probably don't have to go too far in these comments to see someone say, you're crazy for thinking the Rams could win 10 games because people can't stand Jared Goff. Sean McVay got all this early hype and then kind of fell off. So thin on defense, the whole you got to pay Jalen Ramsey thing. And I was like, I believe in Sean McVay to get this team to be a very competent team. And I think 10 wins is almost exactly where the Rams are going to come in. So to me, I think that call is something I'm extremely proud of. I want to tote that one as a victory lap because that was very unpopular to say that the Rams were going to win 10 games and compete in the NFC West. A lot of people had them finishing dead last. But then in last there, you have the Arizona Cardinals at 8-8 is where I predicted them. I think it's safe to say that they will finish above that. This was kind of a pessimistic projection for the Cardinals. I did like them. I did say Kyler Murray MVP bets, decent value, that if everything goes right here, they could be a really legitimate, scary team. We've seen teams like the Chiefs and the Ravens take huge steps in that year 2 with those young quarterbacks, which I certainly said was a potential for the Cardinals. I really worried about the defense. I worried about the offensive line, the physical elements of this team, which have probably been better than expected there. So I think the Cardinals shadow that 8-8. I guess if Cardinals fans want me to say I was wrong on them, that's fine. I really like the Cardinals. I'm happy to see them playing well. But yeah, my record prediction there seems like the Niners are going to finish probably in 4th place there, mainly because of injuries, but to the Cardinals' credit, they did beat the Niners out there in week 1. No Deebo in that game. But then the AFC, let's transition over there. So I had probably my first big miss, like true miss, comes from the AFC North here. I think as we go through the NFC there, NFC North, I got those for the most part right. NFC East looks pretty good. NFC South, maybe you could say the Panthers I missed on, though it doesn't seem like they're really going anywhere. And then NFC West, I'm not really going to say I missed on anything there. Cardinals, I guess, maybe. But for the most part, really nice predictions in the NFC. Not much to change. AFC North, we got something to change. In most of these divisions, we got something to change in the AFC. So that's going to be where I had the Cleveland Browns in last place at 6-10. Now, they could still finish 8-8 and an underwhelming season. But last place, behind the Bengals, that seems pretty unlikely at this point. But I was really buying into the Bengals to have a really good season. I'm not going to completely take the L here. Cleveland has not been as good in the last couple weeks, but I think the Stefanski hire, they clearly have a good team there in Cleveland. I think they finished with probably 8 or 9 wins. So I'll admit, I was wrong on Cleveland. I didn't think that they would put it together. And I think that the fact that Stefanski has come in and has set up a good culture and a good organizational philosophy there is a huge win for Cleveland. Even if they don't go too far this year, you feel very optimistic that you're past the Freddie Kitchens days. You're past the, who was the coach before him? That was such a disaster. Jackson, you're past those days. You seem to have a really good coach and culture here in Cleveland that is going to be able to be something you can build on. So I'll admit it. I was wrong on Cleveland. I don't know if they'll be a playoff team here, but better than I predicted. Then Cincinnati at 6-10, I think that's still in play. They've had some close games. I think they're undefeated against the spread. Joe Burrow has been absolutely lights out. I talked about how he is kind of a different type of rookie because his decision-making and processing was just such a different level for a rookie, and that's shown. Like, he does not look like a rookie quarterback out there. So I think 6-10 is very much still in play with Cincinnati. I do think they probably finish in last place, though. And then you have the Pittsburgh Steelers in second place at 11-5, and the Baltimore Ravens in first place at 11-5. Now, you might look at the way those standings look right now and say, wow, you idiot, you were so far off. Let's rewind a little bit to where we were on those two teams in August. So in August, to say Pittsburgh was going to go 11-5, that was a very, very hard, bold stance to take on Pittsburgh. The majority of people were not buying Pittsburgh, being a defensive-minded team, getting Big Ben in there, kind of looking, what are we going to get from Big Ben? And I said, I think Big Ben will be not a great quarterback, but 85-90% of what he once was. He's going to raise the floor for that offense, and that's absolutely happened. And you pair that with great playmakers. I called that they were really going to focus on the short to intermediate passing game much more than they ever have in the Big Ben days. That's totally happened. They've raised the floor on offense and maintained that defense. And I basically called this a coin toss in the AFC North, both Pittsburgh and Baltimore at 11-5. And that was a really hot take because Baltimore was Super Bowl favorites, maybe a smidgen behind the Chiefs, but for me to even say that the Ravens might not win the AFC North was blasphemous at the time, and I was roasted for being a Lamar Jackson hater for suggesting that they might not win the AFC North. And I predicted that the Ravens would go 11-5. I think that's very much in play. The Steelers seem like they're going to shatter the 11-5. I think the Steelers win 12, 13 games. They've been outstanding. I'm not going to say I was wrong on Pittsburgh, though. I stuck my neck out for Pittsburgh, and if there's Steelers fans that are mad at me for not apologizing for saying that 11-5 is too low, then you can buzz off. Like, I'm very happy with that prediction, and I'm also very happy with this prediction. I pounded the table. I said, look, this happens all the time with MVP candidates. They have peak seasons. Things don't go as well the next year. Teams catch up to these quarterbacks that aren't established passers. Guys like Cam Newton, guys like Lamar Jackson, run-heavy offenses with quarterback-designed runs. Teams adjust to that kind of stuff. And Lamar Jackson's problems as a passer are absolutely showing up this year. Not just that, but the way that offense was built around Lamar's running ability is hurting their ability to adjust and become more of a traditional passing team. They don't have outside receivers. They don't have a good pass-blocking offensive line in a traditional sense. They're getting more injuries, which is something I predicted. That offensive line was mostly healthy last year. Ronnie Stanley's now out. So they're having some problems. Now, the defense has been great. I even said that defense is going to be better this year than it was last year, and I think that's, for the most part, played out. I mean, it's really hard to play defense in a COVID season, but that defense has been outstanding. So I thought this was a coin toss division. I suggested that the Steelers might win this division and caught a lot of ridicule for that. I'm very proud of this AFC North prediction. Other than Cleveland, who I didn't think was going to be terrible, I would say I kind of nailed this division. And I do think Pittsburgh ends up winning it now that they have basically like a 2.5 game lead because they're undefeated. They have the tiebreaker on Baltimore. I think Baltimore could very well come back and beat them on Thanksgiving and tighten that gap. This is far from over. So I like where I stand in the AFC North. AFC East, pretty good here. Some mistakes, though. So I did have Buffalo winning it at 10-6. I think that holds right around that mark. Where I was wrong was these next three teams. New England I had at 10-6. I thought that this defense would be much better, and maybe the COVID thing is hurting the Patriots in that respect with all these holdouts, the fact that, not holdouts, opt-outs. the fact that Cam Newton actually freaking got the thing, their quarterback, he's the only starting quarterback that's gotten COVID so far. The fact that they are a defensive-oriented team, that's going to hurt teams in a COVID season where you don't have that fan base to feed off. If you've never been to an NFL game, having home field for a good defense is a legitimate boost. Like, it's a real thing. People that haven't been to an NFL game might not understand that, but my goodness, it changes silent counts. It gives the defense a motivational boost. You can just feel it in the atmosphere. There's a reason Vegas has, I gotta say Vegas. My girlfriend always, my fiance always gives me crap for the way I say that. Vegas gives I probably just said it wrong again. Whatever. They give the home team 3 points, and this year it hasn't necessarily shown that home field advantage. It's been pretty much a neutral site for all these games. So New England's been slapped by COVID harder than anyone could have ever expected, myself included. But I think Bill has really not done a great job. The one win on Cam Newton, or on the Patriots, is Cam Newton is... I don't know if I'm ready to take a win on Cam Newton or not, honestly. The first 2 weeks didn't look amazing, kind of looked like I expected, not able to push the ball downfield. Then he had Seattle. This week against Buffalo, he looked pretty good. The 2 weeks before that, he looked terrible. He's been a very polarizing quarterback this year. But he certainly, for the course of the season, has not been what a lot of people expected. But yeah, the Patriots are not going to go 10-6. They probably are not going to win this division. They seriously lack talent. And they have underperformed. I would say that I was wrong on the New England Patriots. The Jets at 6-10. Didn't think they'd be great. But 6-10 was too optimistic even then. So there's not really much to say about the Jets. I mean, I was clearly wrong. I was clearly wrong about the Jets winning 6 games for whatever that's worth. Probably the worst take so far. I think most of these you can kind of make reasonable explanations for why I had those things. Miami, I will admit, I was just wrong. I had them going 4-12. I didn't think they had the roster talent, particularly on defense, to become a great defense. I didn't think the offense would be all that good. Ryan Fitzpatrick was incredible on offense for multiple weeks this season. Didn't see that coming. It's still up in the air on how good Tua is going to be. He literally didn't have to do anything against the Chargers or against the Rams. So that's still up in the air. But yeah, man, Brian Flores has done an incredible job with this defense. I was wrong about Miami. I will say it. They look like a playoff contending team. I think that was my biggest whiff on this list to date. So as far as where I will actually concede I was legitimately wrong about your team, I'm going to say Miami is the first one there. Cleveland may be the second one, but can anyone really blame me for not buying into Cleveland all the way? 6-10 was kind of a moderate prediction for them. Let's count Cleveland and say 2 out of 24 teams so far. I feel very good about my predictions. Okay, AFC South. This was a tight race. So some misses here. I had Jacksonville at the bottom at 2-14. That looks very accurate. That looks very good. Houston at 9-7 in third place. They're not going to win 9 games, but I did not have them really in the picture here. I didn't have them as a playoff team. So at least there was that. I didn't think their season was going to go all that well. Bill O'Brien gets fired. This team is falling apart. They're obviously not a 9-win team. That rough start to their season, I think, got the best of them. You got to keep in mind they played the Chiefs, the Ravens, and the Steelers in the first 3 weeks of the season, and then they had to play Minnesota, which was not an easy game either. That clearly got the best of them. It's a lost season. I'm not going to say I was wrong there. It's not like I predicted them to have a good season. I didn't even have them making the playoffs. That win total is just going to be off. As for Tennessee in second place at 9-7 and Indianapolis in first place at 9-7. So I think I'm ready to say I was wrong on Tennessee. I think that Bengals loss was concerning, and I wish we had about 2 more weeks of information before I fully have to apologize about this, but it looks like I was a little bit low on Tennessee. They clearly have an excellent offense. I knew their defense was going to be serviceable. it's actually been kind of the opposite of what I expected. They've been more of an offensive team than a defensive team. Ryan Tannehill's been much more good than bad. There's been some elements of my Titans predictions in there, and there was actually something in my postseason predictions that shows that there was a lot about the Titans that I did like, where I had them upsetting the Ravens in the first round of the playoffs. So 9-7 prediction here. They are currently, where do they stand? They are 5-2. I'm not prepared to say they can't finish the season 9-7. They would have to go 4-5. That'd be pretty pessimistic, but they did just lose to the Bengals. And then we had the Colts at 9-7 as well, not winning the division. This is going to be a tight race. I think both these teams probably finish north of 10 wins, but if both the Colts and the Titans finished 10-6, and I think they got to play this week, right? So I had the Colts winning this division, by the way. I'm just checking on the fly here. Do they play this weekend? I want to say they do. No, the Colts play the Ravens this weekend. Then next Thursday, we get Colts-Titans, which is a great Thursday night game. But yeah, this is going to be a tight race. I think both these teams probably finish a little bit north of that 9-7 mark. But I'm just going to have to take a wait and see on this one. I actually don't mind the prediction that the Colts can win this division. The Titans have been hit or miss this year. So not prepared to say I was entirely wrong here. I think the Titans are a little bit better than I expected. I ranked, 17th in my power rankings? 18th? I had them 18th in my power rankings. They're a better team than that. So I'll apologize about that. I think the Titans are better than I expected. But as far as the actual predictions here, having them be a wild card team, beat the Ravens, be kind of this scrappy team that can beat anyone but not going to be overly consistent, I think the overall outlook on the Titans was pretty good. And then we'll see how that plays out. I wasn't overly confident in that AFC South at all. So for the most part, I feel pretty good about that prediction. Then the AFC West, I had the Chiefs 13-3 at the top, Denver at 8-8, the Chargers at 6-10, and the Raiders at 5-11. So the Raiders and the Dolphins are clearly my worst takes here, where you can clearly say the thinking was off. They're just better teams than you expected. Cleveland being maybe the third team in there, where the thinking was off, the record prediction was way off, your expectations for the season was way off, the power ranking was off, all of it. So the Raiders, to me, 3 out of 32 teams where I was just way off. I will apologize to Browns fans, Dolphins fans, and Raiders fans. So the Raiders I had at 5-11. They're going to finish better than that. The offense has been better than I expected. Credit everybody. I think Derek Carr is playing great. The offensive players are playing great. Gruden's coaching his ass off. The biggest surprise for the Raiders is defensively, they've played much more united. Let's just say that. I was not wrong. I will not apologize that they have made some serious roster mistakes and that the upside of this defense and week-to-week consistency of this defense are a serious question mark. But yeah, the Raiders are probably going to win between 9 and 11 games and probably be a wild card team. I was clearly wrong on them. So I'm sorry, Raiders fans. I like you. I like the Raiders. I like all these teams. I'm always willing to say I was wrong when I'm wrong. It's kind of fun to go back and look. So then I have the Chargers at 6-10. I always got to look and see where the Chargers actually are because they're always losing close games. I mean, they're 2-5. Their point differential is -6. Like, that tells you what the Chargers are. As far as this record prediction, I think that's pretty solid. 6-10, I think that's probably about where they come in. I will apologize about Justin Herbert, though. I mean, he's clearly a good quarterback prospect. I am now comparing him to Matthew Stafford. We've talked about Herbert really in depth. We're going to continue to talk about Herbert. The play-to-play stuff is, for about the 20th time this podcast, I'm going to say hit or miss. The rhythm stuff, it's not at the high level that you want to see. And that was, kind of the mental aspect of quarterbacking was a question for Herbert. It's been better than I expected. I think first read stuff, it's been good. The decision-making's been better than I thought, but there's still been some pretty bad picks in there for Justin Herbert. But the downfield accuracy, the kind of swagger and confidence and ability to have an explosive offense, it's been great for Herbert. Like, I was wrong. He's he's not going to be a bust. I think you're looking at somewhere between Jared Goff and Matthew Stafford is where Herbert's going to end up. Then I had Denver at 8-8. I'm gonna kind of take a W on that one. A very competitive, scrappy team. They've had a ton of injuries that no one could have predicted. I didn't think they'd be a playoff team. I think they'd be a year away. I was 1 foot in, 1 foot out on Drew Lock. I'm still kind of in that territory. I'm kind of leaning out on Drew Lock, but he's keeping his career alive a little bit. So 8-8 for Denver. I think that's pretty accurate prediction. And then Kansas City at 13-3, had him as the best team in football, had him winning the Super Bowl. That's held up. They're probably going to finish about 13-3, if not 14-2 or 15-1. The Chiefs are outstanding. Like I said, man, I'm extremely proud of these predictions. People love to bring up my bad takes. It's fun to go in and look and say, honestly, 29 of the 32 teams, you could maybe mix in Arizona, who I had going 8-8, finishing 4th place. Houston going 9-7, but again, I didn't say Arizona was going to be bad. I gave them a chance to be a wild card sleeper. I didn't think Houston was going to make the playoffs. I don't think those were really misses per se. 29 out of the 32 teams, I feel really happy with my predictions and very proud of them. So I'll apologize to Browns fans. Stefanski's done a great job stopping the Browns from being the Browns for the most part. The Dolphins have just been straight up better than I thought. And then the Raiders, again, have been straight up better than I thought. So I will apologize to the Browns, Dolphins, and Raiders fans. Good job for you guys. You're better than I expected. We're going to wrap up the show with the mailbag. Again, guys, the show is brought to you by Patreon. Patreon.com/ThatFranchiseGuy. You can get access to this exclusive mailbag along with exclusive content. And you support the show in the process. So I appreciate all of you guys, all of my patrons that have been around, all of you that have signed up recently. I want to do a better job shouting you guys out. So Jonah Bell signed up November 3rd. Phil Dotzler increased his pledge on November 3rd. Benjamin Pickett. Joshua Thomas coming in with that MVP sub. Kurt Thomas. I don't know if you guys are related. That's cool if you're spreading the good word. Then we had... that's it. Patreon likes to repeat some of these. So thank you guys for signing up recently. Really appreciate your support. We also had Joel on November 2nd. Jesse on November 2nd coming in with those MVP pledges. Thank you guys. Scott Nance on the 2nd. And Devontae Rivera on the 2nd. So a lot of you guys are coming in hot lately. Coming in to support the show. Coming in to support the YouTube. Means more now than ever. I mean, seriously, the YouTube does well, but for me to sustain my living, for me to be able to do the things I do the show and all of the stuff, the Madden roster, to do all that stuff, and also afford my rent and put food in my belly, wouldn't be possible without Patreon. So thank you, you guys. I seriously cannot explain how much I appreciate your support. It is unbelievable. So if you want to support the show and all that good stuff, head over to patreon.com/ThatFranchiseGuy. And you can get in on this exclusive mailbag that we're about to hop into. So Spencer, who do you think are going to be the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL in 5 years? Mahomes won. I personally do not think Lamar Jackson in 5 years will be a top 5 quarterback. I think he'll be top 10. His running ability is amazing. I see enough problems with him as a passer that I don't think he will be in the top 5. I think Herbert and Kyler Murray will be 2 and 3, the order of which will depend on the success of the organization and how well they develop those guys. Can Josh Allen get into the top 5? Potentially. I think he probably comes in that 6 to 7 range. I think that Houston does a good job in the rebuild to get Deshaun Watson into the top 5 again. And then your 5th spot, is Russ still relevant in 5 years as a top 5 quarterback? I think that's very much possible. I will put Russell Wilson in 5 years still as a top 5 quarterback. So those are going to be my top 5. That's a great question, Spencer. All right, from Steven. Should the Bengals be buyers or sellers at the trade deadline? Neither. I think you get rid of guys. You get rid of Dunlap. That's fine. Maybe you see if people want Geno Atkins, so I guess I'm saying sellers, but maybe even AJ. They have these veterans, man. I'm changing my question my answer as I answer this question. I would sell. I would sell AJ Green. T. Higgins looks freaking phenomenal. T. Higgins is clearly better than AJ Green right now. Now, the trade deadline's over, so trade deadline questions are kind of meaningless at this point. But I would have traded AJ Green, and I would have shopped Geno Atkins. Just, they're not a part of the long-term answer here. You're not winning a Super Bowl this year. But I would keep the talent that you do have that is going to be there in 3-4 years in place for Joe Burrow. I'll probably gloss over any trade questions now just because we are past the deadline. From my man Lions, Alex, how's it going, bro? So if the Lions fire Patricia today, who would be the candidates to join the Lions as their next head coach? Would it be the Titans offensive coordinator or the Bills offensive coordinator, considering I doubt we get Eric Bieniemy? Yeah, I agree. I don't think Bieniemy's the best fit there for Detroit. I think that the Bills offensive coordinator, whose name, I always get Detroit's active coordinator and the Bills offensive coordinator mixed up. 1 second. I want to get this name right. Jeez, I can't type. Yeah, Brian Daboll is the Bills offensive coordinator. So I think that would make a lot of sense. I think you're looking at Josh Allen, Stafford, relatively similar talents. It just that to me it adds up to me in my mind for whatever reason. I think Brian Daboll to Detroit would be my favorite. If Minnesota had a top 5 pick, would they trade up in an effort to get Lawrence? I don't find a trade up for Trevor Lawrence remotely possible. Maybe the Jets think about it. The answer for anybody is if you can get Trevor Lawrence and you aren't the Cardinals or these teams that have young quarterbacks that look like sure things, the answer to me is yes, you do it if you can. I don't think that's going to be possible. I think whoever gets the number 1 pick, which I think is either going to be Jacksonville or the Jets. The other thing is Minnesota at this point, they're not going to probably have a top 5 pick. Their schedule lightens up. They're clearly trying to win. So I get why you would want that if you're a Vikings fan. I just don't think that's remotely likely. I think Justin Fields might be slightly more realistic, but still probably no. I think you're kind of stuck with Kirk Cousins, and maybe you get a Trey Lance or if the BYU kid comes out. But Lawrence, I think, is out of the picture for teams like Minnesota and Dallas and New England. People have been asking about, can those teams get Trevor Lawrence? I think it's a strong no. I think those teams end up too far out of the picture. All right, from Aaron McCorley. With the Jimmy G injury, should the Niners take a swing at Sam Darnold, see if Shanahan can tap into that bench potential? Yeah, man, I think that'd be a hell of a move for Shanahan. I mean, I can't think of a much better young quarterback to fit in the Shanahan scheme. You're looking for mobility and ability to throw on the move, and it's a scheme that dumbs down the offense and simplifies the decision making. I mean, Sam Darnold for San Francisco, if they could pull that off, would be an unbelievable move for them. It would put them right back into the Super Bowl picture, and I'd be so happy to see Sam Darnold get to play with Shanahan. So yeah, if they can pull that off, if the Jets are actually shopping him, 100%. And I actually think it's a decent move for the Jets because when the Niners traded for Shanahan, when the Niners traded for Sam, oh my goodness, when the Niners traded for Jimmy Garoppolo, they didn't play him right away. And they might look at that as, we're actually going to tank the season a little bit, have a high pick. Darnold will be our guy next year. Maybe we can get another pick for Jimmy G. And for that reason, you'd be giving that pick to the Jets. So the Jets might be able to get really good value for Sam Darnold. I think you could get a first for him. So if that ends up being the 10th to 15th pick, that's pretty great for the Jets. You take Lawrence and get a top 15 pick for Sam Darnold. I think that could make a lot of sense. All right, from Oscar Garcia. Realistically speaking, can you see the Eagles cleaning house with Doug Peterson and Howie Roseman, even if the Eagles win the division? If so, can you see the Eagles' coaching position being attractive to top head coach candidates? Yeah, I've talked about this. If I was an Eagles fan, I would want Doug Peterson to be fired. Howie Roseman, I would say be careful what you wish for. He's made some bad draft choices, but I think he's still a generally very good general manager who understands cap manipulation, which is there's about 5 to 6 teams that are capable of manipulating the cap, and Howie Roseman is one of them. It is a very underrated asset, so I would say be careful what you wish for on that front. But also he understands the concept of being aggressive and trying to win a Super Bowl and making trades and doing that kind of stuff. So I would say be careful what you wish for with Howie Roseman. I have a lot of respect for Howie Roseman. Yes, he's made some terrible draft picks, and I've criticized him of that. I would not be so eager to get rid of Howie. Doug Peterson, yeah, man, I would want him gone. But as I've said, I think that he probably gets some leeway if they win the division and make the playoffs this year. All right, from Tim, kind of a personal question, but I'll answer it here on the pod. Did you ever think trying to get into an NFL front office, and did you have a moment where you realized creating content would be more fulfilling? That's been a dilemma in my mind for the last 2 years. I, for a long time, was applying for front office positions, internships, all that good stuff. I have not ruled that out, but I am really enjoying what I have going here. I'm my own boss. I can make whatever content I want. I'm allowed to be wrong, and I don't get fired. If I miss on Justin Herbert, I don't get fired for it, which is very nice because everyone's going to have misses. So it's a very risky position to be in. Now, I have confidence in my ability, and that if I didn't take Trevor Lawrence, I would have been right on the other pick. That's getting into a tangent, but I would not rule out an NFL front office position. The thought of me going from where I'm at now to a minimum wage internship where I have to travel a bunch and bust my ass to maybe get a job, I've reached the point where that doesn't really appeal to me. And it's because, yes, I do think that making content and being my own boss is more fulfilling than that. Now, if I get to a point where a front office actually recognizes me and comes to me and says, you don't have to be an intern, you can have an actual scouting position, it's something I would consider, especially if it was local here. Like if the Vikings came calling and, my office is down the street, it's definitely something I would consider. Would I move to Jacksonville to do it right now? Maybe not. I don't know what that answer is. But yeah, it's definitely a dilemma that I think about all the time. And then I don't know if we have how many more mailbag questions we have here because there's a lot of people coming in trying to get in to be a part of the NCAA series. So I'm just sorting through these. Here we go from Jacob. I'm a believer that the Patriots' success was due more from Belichick than Brady. Now I'm seeing ESPN stating that it was all Brady. Do you think it was Brady or the Patriots just struggling because of poor quarterback play? Also, I like the idea of trading for Fitzpatrick. I think he would do well in New England. And what do you think they do in the offseason to fix the position? Well, interdivision trades, especially of the quarterback variety, are extremely rare. I don't see Miami doing that to help New England, but I think Fitzpatrick will be a free agent. So I agree that would be a good signing for the Patriots is Ryan Fitzpatrick. Now, as for the Belichick-Brady discussion, I'm always going to be a firm believer that Brady does not have 6 rings without Belichick, but Belichick doesn't have 6 rings without Brady either. I think it does split. I think we're seeing, obviously, the Patriots miss Brady. The problem is Belichick, for the 18 years of Brady's time there, was an unbelievable general manager. He got crazy value out of the craziest spots, and he's not doing that in the last 2 years. And I don't think that has anything to do with Brady being there. He just hasn't been a good scout. He hasn't been making good moves. Just the timing is unfortunate for Belichick's legacy truthers. I think Brady was always going to be a really successful quarterback. I think no matter where he goes, if Brady ends up, say, circa 2020 Jacksonville, I think he does, probably. I mean, you would still need someone to get hurt in front of you, but I think at some point you would see him have the Minshew opportunity. Eventually, he was going to find his way somewhere where he would get a chance and prove himself and work his way up. It might have taken a little bit longer without an injury in front of him. I always think Brady was going to find his way. The cream always rises to the top. No one would say that Brady is not a great quarterback. But you're pretty dumb to argue that they win, Brady wins 6 Super Bowls without Belichick. I don't know how you possibly make that argument. If he goes to, New Orleans where they didn't field a defense for 10 years, or Green Bay where they didn't give you any help for 10 years, it wouldn't happen. I don't see how that possibly could have existed, especially when you look at the way Brady won a lot of those Super Bowls, which was defense first. It was, that's the way that people think, is polarizing, right? It's either one or the other. It's not the case. It was the combination of the two's greatness led to the greatest dynasty in the sport. You can't have one without the other. I think Belichick probably gets 1 or 2 rings without Brady. I think Brady probably gets 1, maybe 2 rings without Belichick. The combination of the two equated to 6 rings. So there's my answer. From Coach XXL. I'm a realist when it comes to Lamar. I know he's a good but flawed QB. I just wanted to know what you would do to be a little more creative with the offense instead of relying on the read option to get Lamar into rhythm. Ooh, man. I think they're trying. They aren't calling as many read options. I think you still need the read options to compete this year because you can't just throw that away based on how well it worked last year. Honestly, I don't know if it's a play calling issue. I think it's a matter of I also don't think it's something you fix over the course of this season. They were really hoping, yeah, of course, that they get some opportunities to improve his, 3rd and long ability to be a traditional passer. But it was always going to be the approach of we need this style of offense that we succeeded with last year to be the Super Bowl team we want to be. I think it's an off-season problem. If this season doesn't go the way you want and you start looking towards the future a little more, you might say, all right, we need to get him another receiver. We need to make sure this offensive line can pass protect in a traditional sense, and we need to take an off-season to redo this playbook and have the read option be a less of a focus. I don't think it's something you adjust on the fly. So I don't know if that's the answer you wanted to hear, but that's probably the way I look at that scenario. From Joe is not cool. Joe Burrow or Kyler Murray in a semi-decent situation, think Bills or Broncos maybe, up to you. Who do you think would turn out better? Those are decent comps because they're both very pro style, good receivers, decent offensive lines, good offensive coordinators. So yeah, if I put Joe Burrow or Kyler Murray in those situations, honestly, man, you guys, this tears at my heartstrings because I love both of these players. I hate that I have to pick one and answer this question, but I will do that. I'm going to take Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow to me there's something about this guy. It's that it factor thing. It's you watch the guy, and Kyler has some of it for sure. I don't want to speak a single bad word about Kyler, but Joe Burrow, man, he has all the answers to the test. They told him, you got to start getting rid of the ball quicker. He's like, all right, fine, I'll do it. And he's kicking ass doing that. He's just the complete quarterback, and he is a rookie, and he seriously looks like an all-pro. Play to play to play, the consistency, the mental aspect of it, the leadership. He's just on a different level. He looks like he's been in the league for 5 years. It's just rare. It's Tom Brady-esque is really what it is, and he's got more of the physical tools than Tom Brady ever had. Joe Burrow to me is the guy that I don't want to bet against right now. I don't want to bet against Kyler Murray either, but I think the development from Kyler Murray, from a decision-making processing, some of the accuracy mistakes of the middle of the field, it hasn't been quite as much as I'd like to see. You're obviously very happy if either of them are your quarterbacks. So that's my answer. I'm going to take Joe Burrow. I think the guy's just different. All right. From Justin Oakes. When a team is on its bye week, how do coaches decide whether or not their team deserves a break or more practice? Also, for the playoff bye, do you think it is more of an advantage for the team with the bye or the team playing in the wild card? Because if you have the bye, you're more likely to prepare and you're better rested. But if you play and win, you have the momentum going forward into the division round. So my stance on this is the bye week, if you win a bye, like the Ravens last year is going to play into this, but there's teams in the past that show up for this too. My theory, and you could disagree with this or not, there's not a whole lot of evidence to back this up. My theory is that if you are more of an inexperienced playoff team, you might be better off getting that wild card, because you're probably not playing the best team. You're playing the 3rd or the 4th seed. You get a little momentum. You get some of that confidence going. You're fresh. I think having 2 weeks off, you do often see teams come out flat. It doesn't always happen, but it certainly can happen. There's obvious advantages to having the bye week. You eliminate any sort of randomness that can happen in any NFL game, whether it's bad calls, random fumbles, all this nonsense. You eliminate that aspect for 1 week. That's a huge advantage. You eliminate the potential for injuries, which is huge. You also get an extra week to get healthy. In general, you're much better to get that bye week. Now, if you are an up-and-coming young team with a ton of momentum heading into the season, which like Baltimore last year, and you're already really healthy, and you're a team that thrives off of that physical nature, I think Baltimore last year would have been better off keeping that momentum going instead of taking 2 weeks off. In general, I'd say you'd rather get the bye, but I think there's scenarios where you can look at it and say that actually might hurt this team. And then how do you decide if it is a proper time to pay a young QB that you know you can win with? I mean, you wait as long as you can, but if you got a guy like Patrick Mahomes who you know you got to pay, like, you pay him. It's just so hard, the paying the quarterback thing. It's easy to criticize, but I mean, my best answer is you wait as long as you can. But in the shoes of like the Dallas Cowboys or the Rams, if you're a winning team and you have this young quarterback, it's so easy to, in theory, say, let's let him go. Let's get a rookie in here on a rookie contract. It's so easy. It's theory to sit from our armchairs and say, let him go. You can do this. You can replace this quarterback. But when you're there and you have the guy and you know he's got some flaws, but he's had a lot of success, it's so hard to say, let's let him go. Let's gamble on ourselves. Let's risk, maybe not being as good next year. The amount of media scrutiny that comes with that, your job's always on the line in the NFL. It's just such a risk. It's so hard to be the person that actually does that. So it's such a tough answer to have. All right, from Josh Thomas. Do you think the Saints will stick with Jameis if Drew Brees retires? And how do you honestly think he will do? Jameis just signed the 1-year deal to kind of be a backup there. I don't think he has a huge market. They're not going to be picking high enough for a good draft pick. I think that's likely that they bring Jameis back in a 1-year, $14 million contract. And then they bring Taysom Hill back. How well do I honestly think he does? And that offense with no vertical threat on a team that is going to have no cap space. And, cap space is a myth for New Orleans, but eventually you would think that's going to catch up with them. They're currently projected to be $90 million over the cap. Sean Payton, an offense that is really predicated on death by 1,000 cuts and making the right decision, having Drew Brees there for 10 years. 6-7 wins, decent season. They get stuck in purgatory. Kind of my projection there. I don't think it would work out all that well, but it's a fascinating conversation. All right, last question here from Jake Gadian. With the addition of AB, what team do you see matching up the best against the Bucs, given he's back to his normal self and the team is healthy? Well, I would say the Chiefs because they can keep pace. The Chiefs can score on anybody. But just in the NFC, I don't think Seattle matches up all that well. Because, honestly, Jamel Dean, he would get beat by DK Metcalf, but that's the kind of physical corner that, if you ask me what corner do you want to match up with DK Metcalf, and you give him safety help over the top, obviously, but I think they match up well with the Seahawks offense quite well. I think they could get after Russell Wilson. I think they could match up with those two receivers because those corners are so good. And the Seahawks defense is not very good. I think Tom Brady would pick that zone coverage apart. So I don't think the Seahawks match up all that well. We saw the Packers don't match up all that well. Rest of the NFC, I mean, it's tough. I mean, your answer might be the Saints. The Saints match up and kind of play perfect against that defense that's a little more aggressive. Drew Brees kind of more of the answers to those blitzes. Maybe the Packers can play better in a rematch, but if the Bucs get that offense firing full cylinder, I don't see anyone beating them in the NFC. Now, that's a question mark. I mean, AB has a court hearing in December. There's a reality where AB plays 3 games for the Bucs, and then it comes out that he raped women, and they release him. That's possible. Chris Godwin hasn't been healthy all year. It's not a guarantee that they get this offense firing on all cylinders. I mean, when they don't have Chris Godwin and or AB out there, we saw against the Giants, it's just not a very good offense. That defense is so good, though. So, honestly, if they get AB and Godwin healthy and rolling, I don't see anyone other than the Chiefs beating them. Maybe the Steelers because they're so physical that they could match them up, but that's a scary thought for the rest of the NFC if they get AB and Chris Godwin going. All right, everybody, that is the show. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope this was we just got some more mailbag questions coming in. Okay, we're going to rapid fire these things. Sorry, guys. What do you think the Bengals need to address to build around Burrow? Offensive line. That one was very clear. That was from Hunt. Loomer Coomer. Who are the top 5 head coaches in the league? Luckily, we covered that already. From Jake. How do you assume the projected salary cap will affect the NFL? Do you think the league will even out more in talent and possibly see some of these teams with a lot of cap space make a jump up towards the top half? A lot of trades and surprising cuts. So salary cap questions, I get so frustrated because I answer these based on what I think should happen, and then the cap just turns into a myth. The Saints are currently projected negative $90 million in cap space next year. The cap's supposed to go down $25 million, which would mean they're over negative $100 million in cap space. They just traded for Quan Alexander. Like, they don't give a crap. So I'm honestly kind of done projecting the salary cap to have an impact on this league until we figure out how teams keep getting away with this. I don't know if it's going to have a huge impact. I think the teams that are creative with the cap are going to figure it out and have the same advantage over teams that can't figure it out. From Connor Lee, why have the Packers' pass rushers been disappointing this year? Kenny, Z, and Preston are all underperforming. For the most part, I think most of the league is disappointing in pass rush. I think that last year, their kind of exotic scheme threw some teams off. The Packers' pass rushing scheme with Mike Payton was very creative. I think teams have caught up to that a little bit, but obviously a lack of crowd noise and forcing teams to go silent count. We've seen Zadarius Smith jump off sides a decent amount here, where clearly he was keying off on some snap counts. That's going to play into everyone. But that's my short answer there. From Vic, signing of Devontae Bosby and Prince Mukamara, does Dre Kirkpatrick get phased out of Arizona? Yeah, I think Dre has been a clear weak link there, and they're making strides to replace him with Prince and Bosby there. From Devontae Rivera, given that no MVP has won the Super Bowl in the same year since Kurt Warner, who are your front runners for MVP, and what are their shots at winning the Super Bowl this year? I think Russ wins MVP. I have a hard time seeing him losing that in the second half of the season. And then I think that the Chiefs win the Super Bowl, but I think Seattle and Tampa Bay are right in that mix. All right, final question, final answer here from SFT Yannick. Which team is most likely to reach for a QB this year? All right, good question. I want to pull up these standings. So Lawrence will not be a reach. I don't think Fields will be a reach. He's growing on me, I'll say that. So I think the Jets and the Jags end up with Lawrence and Fields, most likely. So then you're looking at teams like potentially the Patriots, the Cowboys, the Giants, the Vikings, the Falcons, the Panthers. I think your top candidates. Now, I think the Panthers are smart, but let's say like real reach, like not even Trey Lance. Let's imagine Trey Lance is a legitimate top 10 prospect and he goes in the top 10. And then you're looking at, I know people like the BYU kid. Let's take him out of the picture for now. Let's look at guys like Kyle Trask, Jamie Newman, real like Christian Ponder, Blake Bortles type of reaches here. I would look at the Minnesota Vikings in the early teens as a team that could say, we got 2 more years of Kirk Cousins here. Let's bring in a raw prospect that is completely unproven and try to build him up. The Falcons could screw it up. Could screw it up with a new coach, kind of wanting that future quarterback. Could be picking in that 10 to 15 range. The Panthers could get desperate and say, we got Teddy, we like what we have, but we want to increase our upside. Those are 3 candidates to kind of reach for a quarterback in the 10 to 15 range for like a Kyle Trask or Jamie Newman type of guy. Beyond that, I think you're probably in the clear. The Patriots might be a 4th candidate there. But that's a good, interesting question that will be entertaining come draft week. All right, we are officially done with the show. Thank you so much for your Patreon questions, guys. Thank you for your patronage. I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. I hope it offered a brief distraction from this election that is pure madness. I have no idea what happened in the last 2 hours. It's possible that the president got announced since I sat down to record this. But yeah, man, I hope you guys enjoyed. We'll be back later tonight on YouTube with my next NCAA Gophers episode there, the Dynasty episode. But cheers as always, guys. I appreciate you for watching. Like and subscribe and all that good stuff. Cheers, guys. We'll see you later.